All right, so we're going to get recording here. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Maryland Heights and Creve Coeur Township Democrats. Glad to have you all here today. We'll go ahead and kick it over to Miss Florence if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, I would like to get someone
Sure.
else to do that tonight. Cindy, I saw Cindy on. Would you like to lead us, Cindy?
Sure, I can
Or
do
is she
that.
off? Sure, thank you.
No, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And to the Republic.
I have not done this since like elementary school. I'm so
Well,
sorry.
that's okay, Cindy. Go ahead. And to the Republic.
And to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation, under
indivisible,
God,
with liberty and
liberty and justice for all. I am so sorry.
We'll
Well-
maybe edit that part out of the recording if we put it on YouTube.
Yes, do not put that on the internet. That was embarrassing.
Because
Sorry.
some people with bad intentions would take that,
Oh, yeah.
run with it, and we got no time for that mess because we got good work to do. So
Yeah, and I also would like to say this before we move on. I would like to thank Cindy for saying the pledge, leading us in the pledge, and also introduce Cindy again as the interim president of the Creve Coeur Democratic Township Club.
Oh,
Cindy has agreed to be our president because I am resigning, and I had planned to put her on this program, but I didn't get a chance to hear from Cindy. So anyway, I just want you all to know that Cindy will be conducting our meetings along with Alan and Harvey. I'll still be on the scene, but I will not be the visible person. Thank you.
Thank
and
you for
before
your service.
we move on, yeah, thank you, Florence. Everybody feel free to applaud, share some good quick words for Florence for all the time that she's led. And like you said, you're still going to be leading, just maybe not as visibly with this group, but we know that you're going to be doing lots and lots of stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other announcements that people have that they want to share?
Can I just make a quick announcement? I'm Representative Tracy McCreary. Florence, thank you for your decades of service to not just our club, but to the entire region. I met you years ago when you were helping other Democrats get elected, and you have been an inspiration ever since. So thank you, Florence.
Thank you.
My big exciting news, and it applies to a lot of folks, is tomorrow is the first day of filing. So it's a type of pilgrimage where we all go to Jefferson City and file through the Secretary of State's office to sign up to run for office. So the most fortunate of the group are going to be the folks running for State House, because those maps are in place. The state Senate maps have not been announced yet. They're still, state Senate maps are still in the hands of the appellate judges. And then, of course, you've been following the fiasco in the Missouri State Senate. A handful of extremists are holding up the congressional maps, so there are still no congressional lines either. So what will probably happen tomorrow is people are going to file to run for office, and they're maybe going to have to go in there and edit it in the next 5 weeks, because the district lines maybe will make them reconsider what they're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Jake, I think you had an announcement to share.
Yeah, I want to announce that Paula Brown will be running for re-election in the 87th district, the new Maryland Heights district that was drawn. She does have a fundraiser on Wednesday at 5:30. It's virtual. I will share a link in the chat so that you guys can access that if you want to. There should be trivia. It's from 5:30 to 6:30 this Wednesday, the 23rd. Coming up as things get a little warmer, there will be some volunteer opportunities I'll share with you guys as they come along. But I just wanted to pass that information along to you.
All right.
Hey, you guys,
Nicole?
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Who is that?
This was
Donna.
Representative LaDonna Applebaum.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm calling you from my car. I just literally got into Jeff City off the train and made a run to the grocery store, and I tried to get on this call as soon as possible, and I just like to reiterate what Representative, soon-to-be Senator McCreary said, and thanking everyone for all of their help over the last decade, and we really appreciate everything she's done, and will continue to do. But I'm filing tomorrow for my third term, and I just wanted to let you all know that my district has really changed tremendously. I lost Maryland Heights, I lost Chesterfield and Overland and Olivet, but I still get to have unincorporated and all of Creve Coeur. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited to meet a bunch of new people. So anyway, I just wanted to pop in and say hello. Hope everyone's doing well.
Was in Tucson and I can.
Thank you.
Oh, and I guess I would be stabbing myself in the foot if I didn't mention March 31st. I will be having my kickoff, my spring kickoff re-election event at the Post Sports Bar and Grill. That is Thursday, March 31st.
Oh, shoot. I don't have.
All right. Yeah. Nicole, you want to go next?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am Councilwoman Nicole Greer from the city of Creve Coeur. And first of all, I would also like to thank Ms. Pullen for all her dedication to this township. And I know we'll still be working together, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I showed up at a township meeting several years ago. It's not a secret that it's not been that long that I've known what a township is. And so when I did find out about it, I showed up at a meeting. And if you know anything about Black culture and fictive kinship, Ms. Florence quickly became my aunt, and like an aunt to me. And so I just appreciate that. I value our relationship, and I'm looking forward to working with you, continuing to work with you. But thank you for everything that you've done for the Creve Coeur Township. Also, Friday, Councilwoman Greer is turning 50. And so I will be having a 50-year celebration / celebrating a second term as a council person for the city of Creve Coeur. And it will be at the Holiday Inn Creve Coeur. And everybody knows how this goes. The hotel's not technically in Creve Coeur. It's an unincorporated St. Louis County, but they call it Creve Coeur. I think being Maryland Heights and Creve Coeur, we kind of all know how that goes. So it will be at 6 p.m. at that Holiday Inn, and you all are welcome to attend. I would love to see some of you there. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Any other elected officials who want to introduce yourselves? I think we've gotten everybody, but there's always folks I don't know. Oh, yes, Susan Taylor.
I'll raise a physical hand because I was late getting in here. Susan Taylor, City Council member in Maryland Heights.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. I'm pleased to be here.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'll turn it back over to Florence to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Yes, before we go into that, and I hate to keep delaying, but do we have any committee people on tonight from Maryland Heights, Creve Coeur? Do we have any on?
This is Sue Meredith. I'm here.
Well, thank you, Sue, for attending tonight. Sue is our committee woman for Creve Coeur, Democratic Township Club.
Kevin has a school board meeting tonight. That's why he's not attending.
Okay. Do we have anyone else? Dale and
Hi, my name is Karen Taylor, and I was invited by Monica Huddleston to listen to the call. And I'm the committee woman for the Normandy Township.
Great, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Welcome. Okay, then I guess we could go ahead and introduce the speaker. First, I would like to thank our speaker, Attorney Washington, for agreeing to speak to us on such a short notice. That means she is a prepared lady. Thank you so much. And she will be presenting to us on election, preferably unity. And normally when we celebrate Black History Month, we in the past have done a lot with giving accolades to previous people that have done great, recognizing those that have paved the way in many areas. So this is going to be a little different because she's going to talk about elections. So let me read a little bit about her. After spending most of her career in the fields of civil rights and higher education administration, Vicki Washington, JD, retired from the position of Associate Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at the University of Wisconsin System in August of 2016. She relocated to St. Louis at the end of January 2017. Shortly thereafter, Vicki convened a small group of people interested in impacting voter participation and engagement among the Black community in the St. Louis area. The group became the St. Louis Area Voting Initiative, SLAVI, that focuses upon voter education to increase voter registration and engagement in the Black communities across the St. Louis area. SLAVI's members include voting rights advocates, post-secondary educators, and community organizers affiliated with a variety of organizations, including the NAACP, the St. Louis County chapter, the Metropolitan Congregation United, and closely collaborates with the Voter Access and Engagement Initiative at Washington University and the St. Louis Area Voter Protection Coalition. Vicki is a graduate of Spelman College, North Carolina Central School of Law, and completed the Harvard Institute for Management and Leadership in Education. She's the mother of an adult son. Now, there's a lot more about Vicki that I haven't told you, but she is very well known and has done wonderful work in Wisconsin, as well as what she's doing here in the St. Louis area. So let's welcome Attorney Vicki Washington tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks. And thank you, Florence, for that introduction. I'm thinking I'm not an attorney because I'm not practicing anything. I'm just working on voting here in the St. Louis area.
Okay.
Okay,
well.
Yeah. So I appreciate the time to talk with you. And I'll say this before I get started. You know, Florence called me actually last week, and I tried to beg off, I'm gonna tell you the truth, because this is a massive topic. And what happened, every time I look at this, to be honest, I get really irritated, because what is crystal clear is with respect to Black voting rights, it's the same stuff happening over and over again. And so consequently, that's why I created the topic for this presentation tonight, to be like, will full voting rights ever be achieved for Black people? So I have a few PowerPoint slides, and what's the best way for me to do this? I see share screen. Is that what you want me to do?
Yeah, try that.
Okay. Uh-oh, it went away. Zoom, share screen, let's see. I see you. Here it is. Share. Let's hope this works. Okay, so I'm gonna minimize myself. Can you all see these slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Uh,
ma'am.
All right. So I have about, let's see, what's the time frame? Let me start there. I think Florence told me about 20 minutes. Is that right? Roughly?
Yeah, you could take that or even a little bit more.
Okay, so some things I might glide through pretty quickly. And how do you normally handle the questions part at the end or discussion at the end?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So the name of this presentation really is kind of elections then and now, and will full voting rights ever be achieved for Black people? And I pose that question, and I mean, I'm seriously posing that question because it seems, you know, a minimum of every 50 years, there's been major retrenchment, but here lately, it seems, what, every 5 years, there have been major attempts to suppress the Black vote in this country. And I, for one, I'm really kind of tired of it, actually. Let me just say what I'm thinking.
Preach.
So in this discussion and presentation, I'm going to cover most of this stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about the founders of the country, and quite naturally, I'm going to have to skim over a lot of stuff because it's just so much happening and swirling around the founding of the country. And I'll talk about some of the voting rights milestones in America. And then we'll jump into Black suffrage in the United States with a focus on kind of the voting rights, things that impact voting rights for African American, the emancipation and Reconstruction, the Black codes, Reconstruction amendments, the compromise, and then I'll just touch lightly on kind of the devastating impact of these. I'm not going to talk about the cases specifically, but just kind of what happened. And then, oops, that's not supposed to happen. And then the kind of fight for citizenship rights and kind of the upending of the continuing for civil rights. So the founding of the country, as most of you probably know, there was a lot of debate as the founders were looking at the Constitution that all centered on who was really going to have the right to vote. And this went on for quite some time. And believe it or not, they didn't even want all the white men to vote initially. They really only wanted the white property owners to vote. There was a big discussion about what and who among the white property owners would vote, and how much property did the white men need to own to vote, and how old did they need to be to vote. And what's interesting enough about all of this is the people who came over to settle the colonies initially from Britain, a lot of those individuals were not the upper class people from Britain. They were people who were basically, some of them came over here to be able to avoid going to prison. I mean, like, as that other person said, they weren't always the best people. And yet they were here trying to decide, who would actually get the right to vote. Of course, the right women were never considered in that lot, and let alone anybody else. So, and in their conversations, when they talked about the rights of minorities, they were really talking about the people who didn't own land. So ultimately, those individuals, the founders, the people who were writing the Constitution, decided that only white men aged 21 and older who owned land would vote. And that quote at the bottom of the slide was the language that they settled on for the Constitution, saying basically that the time, place, and manner of elections for senators and representatives, those being our federal offices, would be prescribed in each state by the state legislature, but that Congress may at any time by law alter or make such regulation. And of course, that very language is still debated even today. So when you look at what ended up happening in some of those states, even they had varying rules about how much land any white male over 21 required in order for them to be able to vote. It varied. So some of the voting rights milestones over time, after the Declaration of Independence, established the voting rights for white males. Following, and then we had the voting left to the states. That was in 1788. In July 1868, citizenship rights were granted to all US born and naturalized people. That's basically the 14th Amendment. Black men were granted the right to vote with the 15th Amendment, women, the 19th Amendment, Native Americans and Asians granted the right to vote in 1924. The Chinese Exclusion Act ended, giving them some rights. And then in 1961, the DC residents were allowed to vote in presidential elections. And can you believe it that poll taxes weren't banned until 1964? I think most people aren't even aware that it was that late before poll taxes were actually banned. And then in August 65, the Voting Rights Act was passed. In 71, the voting age was lowered to 18, largely to account for the reality that so many young people were going off to war, and withholding the vote for them didn't make any sense whatsoever. The voting rights was extended in 82. In 84, the accessibility for older and disabled people, that act was signed into law by Reagan. The motor voter law in 93, which ostensibly is supposed to enable people to be registered to vote at DMVs, another law that really isn't fully enacted, I guess I would say. That law was signed by Clinton in 93. The Help Motor Voter Act was signed in 02. And then in 2013, we had Shelby, which was probably the first really, really big blow to voting rights since the law was passed in 65. So let's take a look at what's been happening with Black suffrage. So with the history of Black suffrage in the United States, or the right of African Americans to vote in elections, has had almost as many setbacks as it's had advances. And every time we had major gains in the United States in Black voting rights, there's been an element in white society that's immediately sought to suppress the vote or somehow cheat Black people out of their right to vote. So the 15th Amendment was supposed to guarantee Black men the right to vote. However, exercising that right turned out to be quite another matter. With the defeat of the Confederacy, some 4 million Black men and women and children have been granted their freedom. And Frederick Douglass noted that, slavery is not abolished until the Black man has the ballot, because as we know now, and he astutely observed then, is that being able to vote is a prerequisite to self-determination. So with the country having been torn apart by the Civil War, Lincoln was in the process of trying to negotiate with the Southern states. Of course, they really didn't want to rejoin the Union, but he was negotiating with them to join the Union. And that wasn't going so well. But after Lincoln was assassinated, Andrew Johnson stepped in. He was Lincoln's successor. Johnson was a North Carolinian. He strongly believed in states' rights. He showed a great leniency toward white Southerners in the Reconstruction policy. So even though he required them to ratify the 13th Amendment and pledge loyalty to the Union, he gave them basically free rein in establishing their post-war governments. So as a consequence, those 7 states enacted the Black Codes that strictly governed Black citizens' behavior and denied them suffrage rights. Under the Black Codes, people had to sign yearly labor contracts. They could be arrested, fined, forced into unpaid labor. Restrictive nature of the Black Codes resulted in a lot of widespread resistance. Even in the North, people argued that the Black Codes violated the fundamental principles of free labor. Yet in the South, they were steadfastly holding on to the Black Codes, basically because of white supremacy, and they wanted to ensure that their plantations and agriculture could survive. So part of what happened with the Black Codes, as well as the legal system, was completely stacked against Black people, so that the police, the judges, and the former Confederate soldiers all conspired together to make it difficult for African Americans to enforce any of their rights. And so basically, it was as if none of what had happened before was in effect in the South. And it was almost as if the Black Codes basically was a return to slavery in effect. So then we looked at the Reconstruction Amendments, which were to have been in place following the Civil War. And the Republicans in Congress in 1866 passed the Civil Rights Bill, which was intended to build on the 13th Amendment and give Black Americans the rights of citizens. Andrew Johnson first vetoed that bill, claiming that Congress didn't have the authority to pass it. Congress overrode the veto, which was the first time that had ever happened in history. But then they ultimately passed it, overriding that veto, and instituted the Reconstruction. And Black people began to vote in huge numbers in the South, ultimately electing something like 22 Black men to Congress, and helped elect Johnson's successor. Well, of course, you know what's going to happen next with that. So Congress also approved the 14th Amendment in 1866 and ratified it in 1868, which granted the citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the US, including former slaves, and guaranteed equal protection of the laws to all citizens. And in 1870, Congress passed the last of the Reconstruction Amendments, which ostensibly would be stating that voting rights could not be abridged or denied by the United States to anyone on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Oops, I think I skipped something. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, no, I didn't. All right. So unfortunately, with that last statute, the way it was written, it didn't really guarantee the right to vote. What it did basically was to state a guarantee that if the right to vote was stated in any statute, then the right would be guaranteed, but it's not a strict guarantee of the right to vote, which is why so many subsequent acts had to be passed. So then after Reconstruction emerged, and with all the fighting over the Reconstruction Acts and resistance in the South to implementing any of the acts, and the way that it was loosely implemented under Johnson, the Jim Crow laws went into effect in the South. And that in effect just ignored all of the Reconstruction Acts. Amendments, I'm sorry. And during that period of time, the Ku Klux Klan arose in 1865, And basically, there was a lot of violence and terrorism to stop Black people from voting. Then there was a compromise that had been reached that resulted in the federal soldiers leaving the South, and that further enabled basically the Southerners to prevent any of the amendments from being fairly implemented in the South and further restrict any rights that Black people had. And during this time in US history, the overwhelming majority of Black people lived in the South. So this was a serious setback for African Americans in the United States. As a consequence of these horrendous living conditions in the South, a lot of Black people started to move into larger cities following the adoption of Jim Crow laws. But as time progressed and as larger numbers of Black people moved into the larger cities, it kind of reached a tipping point for some of the white city dwellers. And they also then began to demand more laws to limit opportunities for African Americans. So at that point, the Jim Crow laws pretty much started to spread all around the country. And before long, it was basically forced segregation in every aspect of life for African Americans in the United States, whether it was parks, theaters, restaurants, public pools, phone booths, hospitals, living in different communities. Segregation was just basically the legally enforced standard everywhere in the country. And that was pretty much the case until 1948, when Harry Truman ordered the military to desegregate, and then Brown v. Board of Education, the schools desegregated. And so that entire period of time, from the Black codes through Jim Crow until 1948, was legally enforced segregation all across the country, limiting access to every opportunity in life for Black people, and they were basically forced to live in segregation. With respect to voting in this period, it was pretty much restricted because of some practices that had been adopted at the Mississippi State Convention that also spread across the country. They adopted the literacy test, poll taxes, grandfather clause, and disenfranchisement clauses. The literacy test required that people read certain things out of the Constitution or any book that they happen to have on hand. And this, mind you, was happening at a time when Black people initially, after they were after being enslaved, and reading was teaching them, Black people, to read during their period of enslavement was forbidden. It was illegal. So a lot of Black people were not literate at that time. And basically only about, in the early 1900s, only about half of the voting age Black men could read versus 12% of the white men. So it would be virtually impossible for, more than half or around half of the Black men to pass the literacy test. The same thing with the poll taxes. It was very hard for them to pay those taxes. And then of course, because of the way that elections were administered, the people administering the elections could decide that, they could decide how much the taxes would be and whether or not a person attempting to vote would ever be allowed to pay them. The grandfather clauses, of course, if your grandfather had been able to vote in the 1800s, you were automatically in. Of course, African Americans' grandfathers were never allowed to vote in that period of time. And the same thing with the all-white primaries. It was just another way to suppress the vote for Black people. And then then we had a lot of other overlapping things happening across the country that just fed into the voter suppression that was happening at the time. A number of widespread violent actions were taking place. You had the Opolis massacre, the Colfax massacre, the Wilmington massacre, and all of these things were incidents were situations where Black people had been holding offices. The white community surrounding them got mad, or they had businesses, and they violently overthrew the Black people, took over those offices, burned the businesses, and took the businesses from Black people and ran them out of town. All of that happened, and the next culminating big event was Bloody Sunday in 1965, which ultimately led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act. So you see there is, 200 years? I mean, it's a lot of time where Black people were disenfranchised, unable to exercise their right to vote until the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And that might not have happened, but for the fact that it was so violent and broadcast on TV until President Johnson and members of Congress were so guilty that he finally signed the act into law. Then comes President Obama's election in 2008. Once again, that precipitated backlash against Black voters and brought another onslaught of voter suppression laws from the states, voter ID laws, and the rest, were implemented as a consequence of the coalition of people, a large number of whom were Black voters, in order to stop Black people from voting in large numbers. And then finally, the attack on January 6, 2021. A big motivating factor for that attack was the fact that Black people turned out in huge numbers to help Joe Biden get elected. And now we are facing some of the same types of, or worse, voter suppression across the country with all kinds of tactics being implemented at the state level. And they're basically being implemented unabated because of the fact that we were unable to get that federal law passed. So where do things stand now? Well, the white primaries were finally found unconstitutional in 1944. The Voting Rights Act passed in 65. The Shelby v. Holder was caused a lot of damage to the Voting Rights Act because it ruled unconstitutional Section 4B, which was basically the preclearance statute section of the law that required the southern states to submit any changes in the law to the Department of Justice before they could implement them. Well, that was a very big deal because that meant that they couldn't, all these things that they're doing now and have been doing since Shelby would have been stopped in advance, and they wouldn't have been able to implement all these suppressive tactics had Shelby still been in effect. And it's kind of interesting that the conservatives on the Roberts Court took that tack as opposed to sending it back for it to be remediated. They just found it unconstitutional as opposed to sending it back to have the formula changed. So now we're stuck. And the Brnovich case, I mean, if we lose it, it will be harmful, but not nearly as harmful as Shelby. And we're stuck with people in Congress who don't want to adopt any laws that will mitigate or stop the harmful impacts that all of the voter suppression laws and tactics have had on Black voting rights across the country. So I go back to my original question, which is, when will, if ever, Black voting rights actually be achieved in America? Because, from where I sit, every time we have any major gains in the United States, this certain element in white society rears its head to stop progress, particularly for Black voting rights. And, you know, in general, I would say for Democrats, because that's how I see it right now. So that's it. All right.
All right. Thanks so much, Vicky. That was, you know, it's great information and it just boils the blood, right? So much to be upset about. That's enough for me. Anybody have questions? Feel
Yeah,
free to
hi,
just
this is Harvey. I have a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Wait a minute, I don't see you. Hold on. Let me get you back on here. Yes.
Yeah, Vicky, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about voter ID and how you feel about that.
Yeah, so I think my general opinion is that we don't need it. And we in particular don't need strict voter ID. I mean, what's happening right now is that the voter ID laws passing are so restrictive that it's going to be virtually impossible for people who aren't basically middle and upper middle class and highly mobile to obtain the identification needed in order to vote. They are in many states, including Missouri, they have basically eliminated student IDs. You have to have identifications that issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles. And in many states, and I don't know for sure about Missouri, but in many states, the Department of Motor Vehicles are not conveniently located. They're not open during convenient hours. And it's difficult for people to get the underlying documentation to obtain their identification if they don't already have it on hand. So I voted for so many years without having identification. In Wisconsin, all I had to do was show up and state my name and address, and it wasn't a problem. Nor do we have all of the so-called voter fraud that they're alleging. So I just think that's another barrier designed to keep people from being able to vote. There's no real need for it. There's no evidence that voter ID is stopping anything. There wasn't really any in-person voter fraud to speak of, and barely any in-person voter problems that voter ID would remediate.
We've got a question in the chat from Monica Huddleston. How do we get the voter to get educated and actually vote in the African-American community?
If I knew that, I could be rich probably. So Monica, you and I are on the voting group together, and I think we need more people actually to help talk with Black voters in smaller groups. I think that is how it's going to have to be done. How can we identify what I will call informal leaders in the community, not necessarily the usual suspects, but people who have influence and are respected in the community, help them understand what is needed, and then try to engage them and encourage them to talk with their neighbors and friends and other people in the community. I think that's going to end up being the best way to get it done. The second best way, I think, would be if we're able to do if we're ever able to do canvassing again. I did some research for a class that I helped Dr. McClendon with at Washington University. And in doing that research, I took a look at some research that the NAACP and Urban League had done. And the number one most effective way to reach voters that they found over and over again was in-person contact. And the canvassing was the best way. And the reason it was the best way is because you could more easily have a conversation with an individual. You could answer their particular questions about voting and what's important to them. You could give them particular examples related to their personal situation that would enable them to understand why voting in local or state elections or national elections would be important, and then it would stay with them longer. So the personal attention was important and would more likely result in them turning up to vote. So, and that's something I know we've gotten away from largely because of COVID. I'm sure there are other reasons, but I would say that's probably the largest reason. And it's more expensive. I mean, right now, I think, so many people want to be paid to do canvassing. You need materials to do canvassing. So it's probably the combination of all those things.
Next question we have, Kathy Merrick says, I think voter ID would not be a problem if the IDs could be very easily obtained. Why not get a voter ID with your tax return? So what do you think about that?
I think, well, my general opinion is that any way to make getting the identification easy would help remediate the problem. Not everyone files a tax return, so you would still need other means of obtaining an identification.
Yeah, I could imagine the set of people who struggle to get an ID and the set of people who don't file a tax return might have some overlap there too. Yeah. Nancy Hirsch mentions that the League of Women Voters has a Get Out the Vote committee that's working to get people registered in communities that have low turnouts. So there's a great volunteer option if people want to get involved with that. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
And then Jake Abishan asks, are there other states who are doing a good job of expanding access to the ballot box for voters of color? If so, what are these states doing?
So the states that I'm most aware of are those that do the mail voting. And even that has its limitations because of the ballot applications. Sometimes if they require a signature match, a lot of ballots get thrown out, but that's probably the easiest way to get the broadest engagement right now.
Ms. Florence, go ahead.
Yes, I've been working with Dr. McClinton on sending out postcards for people to register to vote. Or how effective do you think that is going to be? Is there a way?
Yeah, and we've been doing that too. So we sent, I worked with a group, a national group, and we coordinated with some groups in Georgia. We sent 500,000 postcards from the St. Louis area, and we had people from different states helping us for the Senate campaign in Georgia. And we have a lot of St. Louis people that help with that effort. And we've done it several different times since. We did it for the St. Louis mayoral contest and some of the others. And I know you all are doing that now. This is my take on it. And some people differ, I'll say that, because Jennifer, Gina, and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. I think we need a good way to measure the impact of that. And because it's not cheap, it's somewhat labor intensive, and it's costly in terms of the postcards and the stamps. It's not as costly as some other methods that we've had to use. So we need to find a way to evaluate turnout without doing that, and response rate based on the people to whom we've sent those cards. And I think maybe we have found a way. I'm not positive. I don't want to tell you a lie. I think Jennifer has discovered a method of doing that. I mean, I've thought, could we put barcodes on something and send it? But a lot depends on what the state ends up adopting right now, and what they're going to allow us to use with these new voting laws, because, you know, right now they're considering passing laws that would prohibit us from mailing applications to people, which is the chief way that we would want to be able to get people to vote. The postcards are a reminder, but a lot of what we've done in the past is to mail absentee ballot applications and voter registration applications and all of those pieces. And the state of Missouri, like some of the other states where Republicans control the state legislature, they propose legislation that would make that illegal. So, yeah, you sent applications plus the postcard, right? Florence? I don't hear, so.
She may have gotten distracted or I really liked the point you made at the beginning though, Vicky, about how, you know, it's fun to write, you know, 25 or 50 postcards to people. You know, you're active, your hand starts to hurt, you're like, I'm really giving something to this effort. And then comparing that to the effect that we have and what's our goal in the work that we're doing. Is it to make ourselves feel better about what we're engaged in? Is it about connecting with neighbors, connecting with communities that we're not a part of? Is it about voter turnout specifically? You know, and I think we do well to ask ourselves, you know, that introspective question of what am I doing this for? Is this for me or is this for something else?
Well, so when we sent postcards out, when St. Louis changed its method of voting to, was it the mayoral election, I think, and they had the primary, and what we noticed is that first of all, the turnout was painfully low for both elections. But it did increase 5% between the primary and the general election. But there's no way of showing a nexus between what we sent, the postcards, and the 5% increase. And that's the problem. So right now it's largely speculative. And working in higher ed, I'll say, we used to work with the campuses on pre-college programs. That was in my portfolio. And we had the campuses, the pre-college directors were like, you have to evaluate this program so that we know whether it's working or not. And do we want to replicate it? You know, how do you improve it? And people would use program evaluations to say it's working, but they couldn't show a nexus between the actual program content. Like the program evaluation was like a user satisfaction survey in effect. It doesn't really show that the program curricula is what led to the outcome. And that's the difference now with what we're sending people is it the postcard that influenced them to go vote? That's what we need to try to figure out, you know, or did they just decide to go vote on their own? And it's a difficult question. I'm not exactly sure how we could get to that unless we were able to get some voters agree to be surveyed before and after in some way. I don't know. We need some higher ed people to look at this.
There were a couple of other comments in the chat. One that mentions the organization Claim Your Power that's also trying to get people registered to vote. They've actually spoken at one of our meetings sometime in the last few months. And there's a link in the chat for anyone who wants to click that. And then Nancy mentions again the League of Women Voters Committee, that you need to be a member of LWV. But other than that, the committee is going and they've got a Zoom meeting a week from today. So you can email her and get more information about that.
Okay, that's in the chat. Let's see. Is that Nancy Hirsch?
Yes.
Okay. I hadn't heard of the Claim Your Power. I have to check it out.
Any other questions or comments from the rest of us?
Yeah, Harvey here again. One more question. Vicky, how is Slavi, and I hope I pronounced that properly. How is Slavi funded and what can we do to help?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. So Slavi is a volunteer organization. We basically don't fund whatever we attempt to do right now. And we also collaborate with other groups that are much larger than our group, which is pretty small. And that's basically how we fund what we are doing. We work very closely with the St. Louis Area Voter Protection Coalition, with WashU, and also with the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition and other groups that they're also working with. So that's it. I mean, we are really small. It's only about 6 of us in that group. Now, we've also kind of done some work with the NAACP and some other larger groups. Yeah, and MCU.
And if any of our folks want to get involved, what can we do to help?
They should just contact me or any one of our group members. And we do have a Facebook page, so they could also reach out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. And I will tell you, we're not incorporated, and we try to be nonpartisan, but there are times when we're not. I don't mind not being nonpartisan, actually, but some of our members work for entities where it's important for them. So we try to be conscientious about that.
It's a really tough dance sometimes for those of us who are in both camps.
It
I
is.
have my partisan work. I have my nonpartisan work. You mentioned MCU a couple of times, and I love
Right.
doing stuff with them. But yeah, it makes it a challenge
Yeah,
sometimes.
you have to be conscientious about it because you don't want to put people in jeopardy. Right.
Vicky, does the sororities and fraternities, the Divide Nine, work with you in any way?
We do work with them because some of our members are members of AKA and Delta. And so we capitalize on any connections that we have within our group. So yes, we do.
Mhm. I know they do a lot of voter registration,
Yes.
even in the seniors in high school and all.
Yes, we've partnered with them on some voter registration activities here in St. Louis. Yes.
Okay.
There used to be a Power to the People program that was the Divine Nine group, but I don't know what's happened to, if it's still active, actually. It was Louise Wilkerson used to convene that group.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I think if they are active, we would be happy to help them with that. And she had a high school curriculum for teaching about voting, if I remember correctly.
Karen Francis mentioned the Have a Plan to Vote from St. Louis County Board of Elections. Is that the thing that came with the magnet in the mail the other day? If so, I definitely got it, but
I think Jennifer Slavic Lohman sent out some, is that the flyer, Karen, that Jennifer? shared?
It's this, and there is
Yeah.
a magnet, but I just didn't know if everyone in St. Louis County got one.
I didn't receive it, at least not yet.
Yeah, and there's a little magnet on the bottom. I was just wondering. if
Okay,
everybody
yeah,
got it.
Jennifer shared that. I have not received it yet, but your name is with an F, so that could be like, mine might be a little later. It's a W.
yeah.
And
I
mine was
received
just
that.
addressed to current resident at my address with the return address, St. Louis County Election Board.
Okay. Mine could be in the mail. I didn't check it yet today.
Okay.
Thank you.
And today.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of people mention that, and the County Board of Elections mentioned on Twitter that they sent it out. So it's like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, Jennifer was really was really high on that. She complimented them. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, Sandra's got hers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Showing off your swag here. Yes, Erica, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I know I've been down to Jeff City doing those election and elected official meetings. I went to one and I'll probably be going to some this week. But the thing about it is, I wanted to ask that question you all talking about what the county board of election has sent, as far as the magnetic post or whatever. Now, are they? But I know they're talking like you said, they're doing a House bill about restricting the right to be able to solicit absentee ballots. Now, are they able, the county itself, able to send that magnet that they can put on the refrigerator to notify people, not so much as saying to go ahead and do the absentee ballot, but to put it on their checklist before, before the election is over with, at some time, so they can be reminded through the board and not through the candidates.
Well, for one thing, they haven't passed that law yet, so they can do it now for sure.
Yeah, so I'm saying, like I said, I was there at the meeting when they, at the hearing or whatever. But
Right.
the thing is, I'm trying to find out, have you all confronted the Board of Elections about, possibly if they have literature that they can send out like that magnetic piece that people can actually put on their refrigerators or wherever they want to hang it up at to remind themselves to go vote absentee if they want to, and not just have, you all talking about doing postcards and, time and energy or whatever, which is great. But if the actual organization that does the election, counts the tally, tally the ballots up, if they're able to do it without the people in general, touching what they're trying to like take away from us, opportunity to be able to tell people about the absentee ballot, if they can do it, it'll save some time and energy and money, to be able to see if they'll be able to do it, to remind us as voters, to actually do that ballot absentee application.
Yeah, in the past, I haven't checked with them recently, but in the past, I have received notification from the Board of Elections as reminders about the elections and the applications for absentee ballots.
Okay, but is there any way to find out if
Yeah,
they're
you
doing it as a whole? I mean, like, different organizations, I know, because as individuals, I know it's a harder task to try to get them to hear an individual voice, but being that you all are different organizations, to be able to find out if they can, at this point, being that some people might not know anything about these hearings, about these House bills that are going through right now, to, prohibit them to be able to have access to a ballot or be reminded. Is there any way at this point, while you all are, pursuing the task of knowing what to do and how to go about doing it, to approach them now before, like you say, before this bill had even gone through, and hop on it? So if the opportunity is there for you all to send out postcards like right now before it's passed, you can remind people now, if you have to go that route.
Right, I see what you're saying. So I think that's it depends kind of answer, because sometimes you can only apply for the absentee ballot within a certain window of time. And right now is probably too early to apply for the upcoming fall elections. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you could go register to vote now. You can do that pretty much anytime. But I'm not sure that, I'll have to go look at it. I think you could, I think it's too early now to apply for an absentee ballot for the fall, unless they let you get on that permanent absentee list, which the way I'm hearing it and reading it, they're trying to eliminate that.
Yeah, you can get an absentee ballot for the April election in the county. That application is open. So as long as you're registered, you should be able to get that. I'm not sure that they have anything for any of the later elections. And I will use that to highlight, remember that there are elections before November, right? We've got April local stuff. School boards are going to be huge. We've talked about that some too, but I'm going to say school board about 80,000 times between now and April 5th, right? And then we've got the primaries in August and the general in November.
Yeah.
Okay, now I just looked at the calendar for the St. Louis County Board of Elections, and tomorrow is the first day to be able to do absentee ballots. So like I say, if it's a way that there's a possibility of going to them as organizations to try to hone us in on it before that House bill is passed, possibly, like I say, if they do have literature that can be sent out, you know, then that'll save y'all some time and some money and efforts to be able to try to individually send out postcards. But that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'll contact them and ask. Won't hurt. All they can do is say no.
Or yes.
Or yes, or yes.
There we go. That's some positivity there.
Yes. Yes, I didn't mean to apply that part. You know, I just have this running thing where when I tell people, just ask. All they can do is say no, and you're not any worse off than if you had never asked.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll talk with Jennifer about it too. I know she stays in close contact with them, so she may already know the answer to that question.
Right. We'll take one or two more if anybody has any. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, Vicki, thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for your presentation. This was wonderful. Yeah. And everybody, remember filing day tomorrow. Cheer on your favorite candidates and make sure that you're getting connected with them. House districts, the map should be findable in lots of places. If you need any questions on, or if you need help finding that, I'm always happy to help somebody find and figure out their new districts. And Senate and congressional maps will have to wait for those. But you know, you can cheer on your candidates anyway. And yeah, get involved in school board races too. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great evening.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.